Hello and welcome to another video. This is episode 47 of the podcast and let's just get right into it. First up, I would like to talk about the basic raglan sweater that I have been making for my boyfriend. Ta-da! It is done! I want to say that last week I showed you a shirt that I was working on. It was a sewing project and I put it on a hanger and it was so much easier to hold than just having it loose. And so I thought maybe that would also just be very easy when it comes to knitwear. Generally, you're not supposed to leave your knitwear on hangers because it drags it down, it makes the piece lose its shape, but I'm just doing this for a couple of minutes, so it shouldn't be the end of the world. So yes, it is finally done. Sweater number 2 for my boyfriend is done. So just very quickly, the specifications. So I used a kilcarra tweed. It's 100% wool from Ireland. It's an Aran weight yarn, 80 meters per 50 grams. And what else? The number is 4731. It has speckles all over. The tweed is just multicolored. And yeah, it is finally done. I think the last episode I had just one of the sleeves left to do and I had to redo the collar as well. Oh yes, of course I also have to tell you about the construction. First, the construction, yes. So I used this book, I think it's called, what was it called? Jibun no seettaa. So I used that as kind of a guideline to create my own, I wouldn't say design, just to create a basic raglan. So basically what I did is I started with a circle at the top. I did some short rows and then as I was doing that, I was just increasing the raglan points. And then after that, I did a couple of short rows at the shoulders, or no, the sleeves. Yeah, I got to the point where the armhole depth and the width of the chest, as well as the width of the sleeve, was appropriate to start splitting for sleeves. And I think I knit the sleeves in the round. Yes, I knit the sleeves in the round and I knit the body flat. You can see the seam right here. And then the ribbing I just did in the round. That's kind of my preferred method, knitting most pieces flat and then when it comes to the ribbing, just doing that in the round, because I generally don't really enjoy knitting the ribbing or seaming the ribbing, although I do that occasionally these days. And what else? I just did a 1x1 rib at the bottom of the sleeves and the body. I did a standard cast off at the bottom and I did an Italian bind off for the sleeves. And then for the ribbing on top, I spoke about this last week that I was having a couple of issues with this, mainly because I think just how would I say it, the neck hole was a bit tight and so I didn't even have that much space to do some ribbing. In any case, I had to redo the ribbing at the neck maybe three times, I believe. The first time the needles were too small. The second time I used bigger needles, but the bind off method wasn't right. I used an Italian bind off and I thought that would be stretchy enough for my boyfriend, but it wasn't. And so what I ended up doing was using Very Pink's knits a very stretchy bind off, and that worked, but it made it a bit loose around the neck. So I just added an elastic. I don't think you can really see it, but I added an elastic at the top to cinch it a bit in, and then it was fine. He has no issues with this. I forgot to mention the needle size that I used for this. I haven't written it down, and I think I forgot as well. No, I used 5.5 millimeters for the body, and then I used 3 millimeters for the ribbing. So he has worn this outside. He really liked it. The weather at the moment is kind of unpredictable. Well, it's always unpredictable here in the Netherlands, but the last couple of days it has been kind of cold-ish. It fluctuates, I believe, between 10 to 14, 15 degrees, but it has been raining a lot. And he's not someone who really likes wearing very thick clothes, even in the winter, but it was cold enough for him to wear this without any issues. And it does seem, just because it is 100% wool, that he didn't overheat, even though it's an Aran weight yarn. I think the only thing that he had some issues with was the neckline, and that is because apparently he is very, very sensitive to wool. I don't have that issue, and so I didn't really think about it all that much with this sweater, because the first one that I made, that was the midwinter sweater, that was even more rustic or scratchy, I should say, than this one, and that one gets far too itchy for him. So I have seen him wear a shirt below it, but that would mean that he can only wear it during the coldest days here in the Netherlands. And I thought, with this yarn, it's pretty soft, in my opinion, definitely softer than the svensk ull that I used for the midwinter sweater. I'm pointing because it's right there. Maybe I should pull it out. It's this one right here, and it comes a bit higher up at his neck, and it becomes really scratchy for him, and I didn't think that would be the case with this sweater, but unfortunately that was the case. So I was first considering to maybe take out the bind off row and then take some softer wool, something like an alpaca, and add it at the inside or on the inside. So that was my first sort of idea. But then I was thinking, then I have to think again about the bind off, the stretchiness of the collar, and maybe it will get a bit too bulky at the neckline as well. So the second option that I'm actually considering is just adding a strip of cotton around the neckline so that it doesn't touch his neck. And I think that's going to be the solution to this. I have some black cotton that has a percentage of, I think it's called elastan, some sort of plastic that makes it a bit stretchy. So I'm going to try and see if I can just add a strip on the inside, and then that should solve the issue, because he does wear an undershirt, something underneath, when he wears this sweater, and it just doesn't reach the height of the sweater. So that's it for this one. It's finally done. I'm very happy with it. I have actually already picked out, or I should say we have already picked out a third and final sweater for this year. It's from a Japanese book. I think I don't know the name of the book, to be honest. I bought an online version of it, so I don't have it with me right now. But this will just come up, I believe, in maybe 2 months. I said I was going to try and knit the last one around November. Yes. Wait, that's in a month. Oh, Okay, so maybe it will show up a bit quicker on the channel. And this time I was going to look for a yarn that would be a bit more, how would I say, skin friendly for him. And I didn't want to buy a new yarn because there are not very good yarn stores in my general vicinity, and so I thought, okay, I think I should just try and find a yarn that I've worked with already, and so that he can either try on the garment and see how it feels, or he can feel the yarn and see if it might irritate his skin or not. And that's something we did a couple of days ago. And he found onion yarn number 4, wool plus nettle, to be quite nice. This is a yarn that I've been using for, I think it's been maybe 1.5 years now. I knit up my first socks with this yarn, and the sailor collar pullover that I finished in the last podcast episode was also made with that yarn. So he tried that sweater on actually on his bare skin, and it seemed to be way nicer than the two that I have here. So that is going to happen. It's going to be another raglan, but this time I think it has a type of broken stitch, broken rib, I think it's called, and a raglan, and it's top down. No, it's bottom up. It's bottom up this time, so that will be the first bottom up sweater that I will make for him. And now that I have some experience when it comes to what length the sweater should be for him, I think that's not going to be an issue at all. I generally just want to also become better at knitting things bottom up. I guess just I want to have a better understanding of construction anyways. And so it's been really fun knitting a sweater for someone who has such a different body structure as me. Yep. So that's everything on this sweater. Next up, I have a vintage piece. This is from Jack Frost Blouse book number or volume 28 from 1938, and it's called the Rosemond Blouse. I started this a couple of days ago, and I have a lot to talk about, but first up I wanted to tell you about the yarn that I'm using. So this is some yarn from Isager. It is the Isager tweed, which is 70% wool, 30% mohair yarn. It has a yardage of 200 meters per 50 grams, so a fingering weight yarn, single ply, and the color that I'm using is bottle green. Now, I actually bought this 4 years ago, I think, because this was the time that I was actually starting to look into whether or not I would be able to actually knit garments. And so I got this Japanese book. It's called Eclogue, and yeah, it's called Eclogue. It's by Toshiyuki Shimada, who is a very popular knitwear designer. I think this is his most recent book. It came out in 2018, and I was just captivated by the cover. I thought this looked really cute and I wanted to make it. And so this was in collaboration with Isager Yarn. Isager has a lot of ties with Japan. I believe that Helga Isager actually studied Japanese, and so she's also often in Japan. So it makes sense, the connection. But that's actually how I first got introduced to Isager. So I bought the yarn for this sweater, and clearly at that time I was not ready for a fingering weight colorwork sweater, and so I never managed to make it. And so when I was reorganizing my yarn, I was thinking about it, whether or not I would still like to knit up this sweater, and I think the answer is no. The last couple of months I've really been trying to think of style, what type of pieces that I want to knit, because on one hand I really like knitting, well obviously, but what I'm trying to say is that I like to knit just for the sake of knitting, but on the other hand, I also like to knit for functionality. And so right now I'm trying to find a nice balance where I'm knitting things that I am enjoying the process of knitting, and also at the same time something that I can actually wear, and or something that I will actually reach for when I'm dressing up in the morning. Therefore, I've been thinking about what my style kind of is, which colors I like to work with, and what colors work well together. And I think if I would have to give a kind of bullet point of things that I like, first up, I like dark colors, especially dark green. I love that color. Dark green, dark blue, dark purple. I like a very dark olive as well. And I also like bright colors from time to time, so pops of colors, so maybe bright green, bright red. And so I was just thinking about whether or not this would really fit in my closet, and I don't think that I want to knit this anymore. And so I've been thinking about how to repurpose the yarn, because it's color work. I can show you the full picture of it right here. So there's not a lot of blue and there's not a lot of white, and so there's not much I can do with that. I think I have 3 balls that are kind of turquoise, white, off-white I should say, and light blue, so I think I might just sell those. And then I had 3 balls of dark green and then 1 ball of light green, and so instantly I thought, okay, maybe I can make something very light with the dark green. I think it's called bottle green. Yes, if maybe I can do something with that. And that's kind of how I came to the rosemond blouse. This was also a pattern that I had been thinking of making, or I wanted to make. It was in my summer knitting plans video, and I'm very happy that I started with it. It's been an interesting journey, or I would say very filled with learning moments, I should say. So the original gauge of this sweater was, I believe, 28 stitches. The pattern doesn't give any gauge, a row count, essentially, because mostly in the pattern it just says knit up until so and so inches, which I think is actually quite nice, because sometimes, you know, when you're knitting a pattern and they give both the stitch and row gauge, sometimes the row gauge might be off, and so it's nice to just it's nice to just be able to not worry about hitting both of those measurements, so to speak. In any case, I didn't meet that stitch gauge either. I used 3mm needles for this piece, and I just knit up a swatch. I calculated the amount of stitches in a row. I believe mine was 23 stitches per 10 centimeter, and yeah, the original pattern was 28 stitches, so I ended up rewriting the entire pattern. I had to anyways, because the measurements were given in American measurements, and so I already had to convert it to centimeters. So I thought, it doesn't even matter. I might as well just do the stitch do the I might as well just recalculate the entire sweater. So that's essentially what I did. So the construction is as follows. You start actually at the back. You cast on a number of stitches. I just used the long tail cast on. Then you do the ribbing for about 7 centimeters, and that's when you increase a couple of stitches evenly, and then you just knit up straight. When you come to the point of making the armholes, you cast off a number of stitches, you decrease a number of stitches, you decrease a number of stitches, and then you just knit up straight, and then you bind off for a couple of rows on each side. I did put in some modifications. So first up, okay, so I found a new issue here, is that I hit myself with the clothing hanger. So I have to be a bit more careful when it comes to that. But yes, generally when they talk about binding off stitches at the top to make the shoulder shaping, I actually like to just put in some short rows instead, so that you won't have that type of staircase bind off situation, and it's just kind of annoying to seam that up. So generally what I will do is, yes, so short rows. In my case, I like to do Japanese short rows, and then I leave live stitches on there, and then I do the front, and then I do a 3 needle bind off. Very simple, very nice looking, in my opinion. Yeah, so I've done that here as well. So there's that. There's nothing too special about the back. You do the front in a similar way, although you do decrease an extra amount of stitches at the front. And what's very interesting, or actually just fun, is the fact that there's actually a hole, not a hole, a pocket. There's a pocket at the front, and I did also make modifications for that as well. I believe in the original they tell you to cast on a number of stitches here, and is that what they tell you to do? I don't know. I've forgotten, but I think it was something like casting off stitches and then casting new ones on, or just leaving the live stitches and casting on new stitches and then working up, and etc etc, doing the whole neck situation. But what I ended up doing actually was I knit this tiny square first, and then put the live stitches on hold, and then once I got to the pocket part, I put the stitches that I was knitting with here on hold, and then I just picked up the live stitches from the pocket, and then I just decided to knit up. And so in the end, the idea is to seam the pocket here at the back, and then just knit a couple of rows of ribbing and sew that onto the blouse. Once you've passed all of that, you keep on knitting straight until you get to the neck area, and that's when you start decreasing on, you start working on each side separately. So you decrease a number of stitches, and then you work a number of stitches, rows straight, and then you do, in my case, the short row shaping, and then you do the 3 needle bind off. So you do that on both sides, and then this is where I'm at. Now, after I had finished the back and the front, I started working on the neckband, mainly because I thought that the neck was looking a bit strange. And that was because the neck was way higher than the front, and I was a bit confused as to why. Well, I figured it out quite quickly. It turned out that I made a miscalculation in terms of converting the bind off rows to short rows, and I had added too many short rows at the back, and so I took that out. And then, well, I took the ribbing out, and I had to take out the bind off as well. And I took a couple of rows out at the back, thought I had fixed it, and then I figured that I had the same issue again. And what I found out was that I essentially just knit up the front a bit too short. So I need about maybe 4 more rows at the front, and I checked my pattern, and that was exactly the amount that I had taken out. I don't know the reasoning anymore, but at some point I figured that maybe the front might be a bit too long, and I took out 4 rows here at the top, and the consequence was that it was looking really jank at the back. So that is what I'm going to do after this podcast. I'm going to take out the ribbing and take out the bind off again and add a couple of extra centimeters. So I don't know, I think that should be all right to have the short rows not completely up at the top. I think I was planning on just knitting an extra couple of centimeters, but I don't know if that changes anything in terms of the shaping, that maybe it'll, I don't know, turn a bit more this way. But if I think about it, because you're kind of knitting diagonally because of the short rows, but I'll just have to see. I think it would be a fun experiment. Actually, I'm pretty confident. I wouldn't say pretty confident, but I don't think that it should be a problem. Now, one thing that kind of irks me, and you probably not notice it all that much, is that this side is a bit wider than this side. And when I was seaming up the sides, I found out that I had dropped 2 stitches. Actually, I haven't really fixed them. I just put some stitch markers here to hold them in place. I dropped 2 stitches at the start at the front side here, and so this side is a bit more baggy, but I thought maybe two stitches might not make that much of a difference, but then again, it is just a bit less than a centimeter on the side of the front side that is a bit shorter. So it probably won't pose an issue, but it might be slightly noticeable if you're me, I think, or if you also knit. I don't know if you look very closely at the garment, but yeah, I think it's okay. On the short side, I did follow the measurements are actually correct. I didn't know that it was just this high-waisted, because on the model it didn't necessarily look that way. But yeah, so I don't know, I do think that I have quite a short torso. In any case, I think this would still look nice in, for instance, the blue jeans that I tend to wear often. As for the sleeves, I'm excited to try those out. Essentially, you start at the top, you pick up a number of stitches here at the top, and then every row you pick up more stitches until you've picked up everything. And then they tell you to knit it flat, but I think I'm just going to knit it in the round anyways. So that's a new way of sleeve construction for me. I think that's pretty interesting. I have 50 grams left, a little bit more. I still have my swatch in this bag and a tiny piece left from the second ball. I think that might just actually go into the shoulders right here, but I think I'm gonna make it. What I'm planning on doing anyways is measuring the last ball before I start knitting, and then making sure that I finish the sleeve before I hit halfway, and then start on the second sleeve so that I definitely have enough. I'm really happy with it, excited to see how it's going to look in the end. I am recording the filming process. No, I am recording the knitting process, so that should be on my channel at some point. Also, I forgot to mention, I think, that I did the ribbing with 2.5 millimeter needles. I actually bought some fingering weight yarn and some sport weight yarn a couple of days ago, because as I said last week, I was trying to knit more finer garments, and I found that the amount of fingering and sport weight yarn that I had usually wasn't enough to make something. I found that 150 grams is the minimum that I need, and usually it's about 170 grams to 225 that I might need for a short sleeve top, and that's something that I want to make more of these coming couple of weeks, or I should actually say just next year. They arrived, I think, 2 days ago, and so after I'm done with this, I think my next vintage project is going to be a sport weight vest. So that's going to be exciting. I'm also thinking of grading up this piece. Again, this is more to do with my curiosity again in terms of construction and what happens to our clothes when we size them up or size them down. So I'm going to try and do that. I actually wrote, so like I said, I made heavy modifications to this, changed the gauge, change a number of techniques and some parts of the construction. And so I actually did write them out as I was working on it. So I had a Word document on my computer and just typing everything out. And then when I made corrections, I'd add that to it. So I actually almost have a full modern pattern for this piece. And so I'm going to try and see if I can use some of the books that I recently received from Japan with regards to grading to grade these patterns. So that's very exciting. I did mention a couple of weeks ago that many of my vintage books had come in. Actually, all of them had. The only thing is that I felt so overwhelmed. I don't know, I don't really like talking about things that I haven't discovered myself, if that makes any sense. I haven't spent time with them, so I can't really tell you too much about them. My podcast, for me, I'd like it to be a place that gives information instead of just showing I got this and it's going to be laying in my closet. It's going to be sitting in my bookcase for a number of months, and both of us are none the wiser about what actually this book, or I don't know, this item entails. So there's that. As I go through these books, I will be talking about them on the channel. Actually, at the moment, I am reading Barbara Walker's Top Down book. I don't know if that's the exact title. I think it's something knitting from top to bottom. It's a book that I wanted to get for quite some time, but I think a couple of months ago it was completely sold out everywhere. But then I found that on the Internet Archive website, you can actually borrow it for free. So you can borrow books there for free for 1 hour. And if you're continuously reading through it, it won't just cut off your borrowing time. So you can just read it. And actually there's not really an issue when it comes to availability, I have found. But yeah, I started reading through it. I have only read a couple of paragraphs. I checked out the skirt construction because I have been wanting to knit a couple of skirts. I looked up how to knit up pleated skirts, and then what else did I do? I looked up the raglan, how to make a top-down raglan, and like I said, just a couple of paragraphs, but I thought it was a wildly interesting book, and it's definitely, I think, something I would recommend, especially if you are really interested in knitting clothes top down. Did I say top bottom this whole time? Anyway, if you are interested in knitting things top down, I believe that if you read this book, you'll definitely gain an extra, you'll level up your knitting, I think. So I'm excited to read through that book in the coming couple of weeks. I also haven't forgotten about the other book that I was reading. I actually have it on my desk. The Knitting Plus book. I haven't read through this for a couple of months at this point because I think I was reading it right before I went on holiday. But there was just one point that a bit irked me on this, because I thought this was going to be a book that had a lot more information about, well, let me put it this way. At some point there was a section where they spoke about, how would I say this, short rows for accommodating a larger bust. And then they said something like, oh, okay, if you want to know more about this, then go read this book. And that was a bit frustrating for me because this was actually a reference for another book that I read. I also made a review for that on this channel. I think it was something like writing patterns. And so I just hope that it won't be something like, okay, if you want to learn about this particular topic, you'll have to read this book. And then this book says, well, if you want to learn about this particular technique, you need this book. And then I'm almost 3 books down in the rabbit hole at this point. I think the book it was referencing was Biggle Knits. But before I think about even purchasing that book, I first want to get through this one. Very quickly, actually, I would like to tell you about the sock restoration, or I should say just sock mending, that I did this past week. So this is the first sock I ever knit. I knit this back in March of last year, and it has been heavily used. A ton of kilometers in Japan, and just a staple house sock. And just also, I also use this in my shoes. They fit as well. It's a DK weight sock, and actually a couple of weeks actually, I finally wore these out, and it's the onion number 4 that I was talking about earlier in the podcast. 70% organic wool and 30% nettle fiber. And a couple of days ago I darned it. So yeah, I actually didn't do that neat of a job, but I'm finding now that really doesn't matter, because it's already starting to, I don't know, I guess felt over or something. So yeah, it seems to it seems to have worked. I can show you how the inside looks as well. You can almost not see that it was that it was darned on the inside, I think, even, which is interesting. Well, the texture is different from the pearls here on top. But yeah, this has been well worn. Oh, I love these socks. They are great. So basically, you need like a darning ball, or that definitely makes it easier. I don't know what they're actually called, but they're just these wooden things that you put in so that you can easily make darn a piece. But I have these exercise balls that I use for my back when I have a knot or something. I'll put it against the wall and then go up and down, and that kind of rolls them out. But I found that they work perfect for just putting them in here. So I don't know, maybe you have one of those and you don't have a sort of darning ball or whatever, and then this would be an alternative. So I have finished doing it for these brown socks. I had another pair of dark green socks that I still have to do, so I'll do that in the coming week. So that was just a quick sock update, sock restoration, so to speak. Next up, I want to talk about a scarf that I've been working on. So I remember talking about how I bought a lot of 100% alpaca yarn on sale and I wasn't aware of the fact that it stretches out. It doesn't have memory as, for instance, merino wool or some other type of wool. And so that can become an issue when you're using only that strand of yarn for a sweater. And so I was thinking what I could possibly do. So I was first considering maybe taking a thin yarn and adding that and knitting a sweater with 2 strands of yarn. But I didn't really like that idea, and so I just looked online what 100% alpaca wool would be useful for, and I found out that they work well for scarves, and so that's something that I started working on. Maybe you might remember this book here. It is it's called Makimono, and it is by Kaze Kobo. She also has another name, but I forget what it is. Oh yeah, Yoko Hatta. I think Yoko Hatta or Hatta Yoko is her actual name, but there's a different reading of these characters, so you can read it as Kase Kobo as well. A bit of Japanese knowledge here, but this book actually has a picture of her here. So this is the designer. I love her work. She's one of my favorite Japanese designers. I have a couple of her books. I have this one right here. It's called Traditional Nitto. Traditional knits, so traditional Western knits. It's mostly Aran. Let's try that again. It's mostly just cables and color work, fine color work, Fair Isle, so to speak. I haven't knit up any of these yet. I think mainly because I was interested in the Fair Isle patterns in this one, but I want to put in a lot of thought when it comes to the colors. You know, I was thinking of using Holst garn for feral, but because I don't really have many good yarn shops in the vicinity, I can't just go out and look at the colors and compare them, stuff like that. So the other option would be to buy, they call them in English or in Dutch, stalen kaart. So just a card with the colors on there and a snippet of the yarn, so that I can look and see what might work well together. So it's just a matter of having time to knit one of these up and also finding the right colors. Another book that I have from her is this one. It's her seamless knits, Yoko Hatta's seamless knits, and there are so many cute sweaters in here. This is a cardigan I have been wanting to knit for quite some time. Maybe I can do that with some sport weight yarn that I have. I have to take a better look at it. Maybe you'll remember these mittens, my first and only successful ones. So I think this is going to be my second pattern of hers that hopefully I will finish soon. Before I get into the pattern, I would like to say that I really appreciate this book because it's just filled with scarves, but all these scarves have such unique, or I would say more advanced techniques here. So, well, here you have, let's see, I think you call this directional knitting. So it's called dot, and so you have the main color, and then I don't know. You can see the picture. Yeah, I don't know the names of the techniques, mind you, so I don't know how I had it in my head that I could possibly explain these things to you in a digestible manner. But what else do you have? You have some intarsia. We also have some brioche, really cool brioche here. Oh wait, yes. This one I think is called Wave. Is it called Wave? Yes. This is also one that I've really been wanting to make. And then we have Peak here with the peaks and valleys on the scarf, that's heavily textured. And then you also have some double knitting, just really cool stuff. I went for something a bit more on the easy side. I just wanted a knit that was, how would I say it, not necessarily quick, but just meditative. So something that you can really get into the flow of. If I can find it here, it's on page 20. Yes, it's Swan. This is Butterfly. They're the same pattern, only this uses 2 colors and a different type of yarn. So I'm going more for something like this. I have this yarn right here. This is 100% llama. Is it llama? I said alpaca, but it is llama. But there is a difference in llama and alpaca. Llama and alpaca are 2 different animals. However, I looked up whether or not llama yarn was similar to alpaca, and it was. So yes, it's called, what's it called? It's called Soft Llama Fine. I think this one is actually from Svarta Fåret, and it's 100% baby llama. It's a sport weight, 166 meters per 50 grams, and the color is black beans, zwarte bonen, or at least that's what the That's the Dutch name of it. And the color code is 928. Yes. And I'm using currently 3.5 millimeters. So this is actually completely different from the how would I say it? The modeled one in the book. The modeled one uses Hamanaka Sonomono Royal Alpaca, and that's just a yarn that's not very accessible to me because they don't really sell Hamanaka yarn in Europe, although they should, because they have some really fire yarns. They have this line Sonomono, and it's mostly just alpaca yarn, and actually quite recently 2 books released in Japan that feature those yarns. And one is, I think, for small items, so scarves, hats, gloves, and the other one is for bigger pieces, sweaters and stuff like that. I actually bought an online version of those, and I already have a plan for one piece, so that's just for the future, probably next year. In any case, the yarn that they were using is a fingering weight yarn. It's 105 meters per 25 grams and 100% alpaca. And they used a size 5 Japanese knitting needles, which comes down to 3.6 millimeters, so one size larger than the one that I'm using. And the reason why I chose 3 millimeter needles was because that was what was recommended on the ball, and I didn't want something that was too loose. As you can see already, it's quite see-through, so I was a bit, I wouldn't say necessarily worried, because I didn't make a gauge swatch or anything like that, but I felt that, this might come out a bit smaller than on the picture. But the pattern is pretty straightforward, and I think you can actually just make it you can enlarge it quite easily. I have 400 grams of this yarn, so I think this will work out quite nicely. So right now I'm at this point. So the way this is constructed, it's going to be a half circle. Well, you can already see it is a half circle, but you start here at the center, you make a strip of garter stitch, and then you pick, once you're on one side of the garter strip, you knit all the way to the end, pick up stitches from the side, then you pick up stitches on your cast on edge, and then you just start knitting back and forth. And it's just a lot of stockinette where you increase with a yarn over on the sides. You have a garter stitch border here, and then every couple of rows you increase heavily with yarn overs, and so you get this really nice round circle thing. I messed up on my latest increase. I started the increase row 2 rows too early, and so on one side of the scarf the yarn over is pretty close to the edge, which is not an issue. I just need to add an extra row on the next section of the piece, and I think it's fine. I didn't really think it was necessary to rip this all out, and in any case it's just going to be crumpled up anyway. It's not going to be very noticeable. I think you don't even notice it now because you can't see it. So I'm excited for this. It's a very fun knit, and that's also something I really like about this book, because you have these huge challenges of brioche or double knitting or very heavily textured pieces, and you also just have a lot of for instance, garter stitch or just stockinette stitch, and maybe some lace here and there. And so you can choose really your difficulty level. It's an excellent book in my opinion. So that's all I have to say when it comes to this. I am very happy with the prospect of a new scarf. I actually don't have that many scarves. I don't have any. Well, I have a hood scarf. That's the closest thing to a scarf that I have. It's the red one that I made last year, so it functions as a hood but also a scarf. But I really just wanted something a bit more elegant and big and cozy and soft, and I think this is going to be the perfect piece. Yep. Okay, so now I wanted to give a bit of an update with regards to the Isager archive collection that I've been working on. So progress has been stagnant. So to speak, I've had to I've knit up a couple of things, but it didn't work out. I already spoke about that, using 100% alpaca, not a great choice. And so I had to go back to the drawing board, and I thought maybe I should start working on something else, a smaller piece within the collection. And I quickly stumbled upon the Flora Slipover by Camilla Vell. I think that's how you pronounce it. I use Google Translate for that. I'm really not good with Danish pronunciation. So if anyone is out there who is Danish and knows how to pronounce the designer's name, please let me know in the comment section below. But yes, it's the Flora Slipover. So I decided to use some yarn from Ístex. I used their plötulopi. Yeah. So this is unspun wool, 300 meters per 100 grams, 150 meters per 50 grams sport weight. And this is the first time that I'm working with it. I thought it was interesting. I haven't worked with a lot of unspun yarn before, and aside from that, it's rather affordable, and I got a good deal with this. I think per 100 grams it's 7.45, which is already on the lower end of, how would I say this, lower end of natural fibers. Yeah. And I got 30% off from that. So what's that? Maybe 4.90, about 4.95 euros per 100 grams, which is a great price. So yes, what should I say about this? The colors, of course. The main color here is dark gray heather. The code is 859103. Then we have the first contrast color, which is dark amber heather, which is 851426. And then we have the light ash heather, and that is 85102. This is the combination for the sweater. I didn't come up with this combination myself. I was just looking on Ravelry, and I found this one piece. I can't remember what it was. I think a sweater or something that used this combination, and I felt that it looked really, really good. So I made a tiny swatch. Maybe I can tell you also about the slip over it, the construction. It's basically you work from the bottom up. You start with the ribbing, then you do the color work, and then you split for the armholes, and then you knit everything flat, and then you do the ribbing at the sleeve at the armhole and at the neck. So this was my swatch. This is not the final swatch. I still need to, I think, make some more calculations. So here's the thing basically. Yeah, I got the pattern yesterday, and I got the yarn also in yesterday, I think. And so I tried the yarn out, and oh my gosh, it is so fragile to knit with. I don't really know if I enjoy knitting with this yarn just because of how fragile it is and how easily it just rips. It makes me have to think a lot or focus a lot on my tensioning. In any case, it does give a nice and sturdy piece. So that's fun. I In any case, I bought the pattern yesterday and I finally got to read through it. I haven't read everything, but what I found was that, well, I could have known this already before, but the sizing goes from the finished measurements of the piece goes from 93 centimeters up until 140. And the designer said that the recommended amount of ease was between -5 and +5 centimeters. The thing is that I have a bust between 80 to 83 centimeters, and so the smallest amount of positive ease that I could have would be, what was it? It was 93 or was it 98? I think it was 93 was 10 centimeters. So 5 centimeters too much. And so I had to think of a way to size this down. Now, the pattern does use DK weight yarn, and this is a sport weight yarn. So I knit up a swatch, and this, well, I'm so confused because some websites say this is worsted weight and others say that it's sport weight. But in any case, I knit this up using 5.5 millimeter needles, and actually I don't really care too much about the row gauge. Row gauge is kind of, doesn't really matter to me any more, I think. Definitely when I'm making heavy modifications, I'll just now, basically my game plan is to block it in between a process with my iron, and I can count the row gauge then and see how much length I would like at the bottom. So that's not going to be too much of an issue. So what was I trying to say with this? I used 5.5 millimeter needles for this, and I got a stitch gauge of 21 stitches, and the pattern says 18. So if I were to use that on the first size, that would bring my my vest down to 79 centimeters, which is actually within the recommended amount. So now that I'm thinking about it, I'm a bit, I would say, on a crossroad now, because I was actually planning on using the stitch count for the second size and then use this gauge, so that then what would happen would be that I would get something with some positive ease, but maybe something with some negative ease would be nice too for a difference. I am trying to get more fitted clothes, so maybe I should actually go for the first size and just size down by means of a lighter weight yarn or thinner weight yarn. So that's something I still need to try and think about. At some point, I still did try to, I don't know what I was trying to do. I don't know what I was trying to do. I think I was just really tired last night, and I just knit up this monstrosity. It's just not, it's so bad. The ribbing is so loose and it's far too big for me. I think you can see that already in this way. So I don't know what to do with this. I'm just going to take the needles off and just leave it and figure out what I can do with it. Maybe I can reuse the yarn, but I'm a bit doubtful because it is so fragile. it's a problem I'm going to just put on hold for now. So that's where I'm at with the Flora slip over. I also did buy some yarn again for the, what do you call it? For the uh Johanna sweater, but it's also actually just this yarn, but that is something I think I'll talk about next week. I think if everything goes well, I might be able to finish the Flora slipover quite soon and then jump over to the sweater and then do the Esther sweater. I've also just been thinking about the other projects in the collection, and you know, I don't know how many designers, maybe 12 or 13 different designers worked on this collection. So the styles are going to be different, despite the fact that the patterns were derived from, are based upon the designs of Åse Lund Jensen. So there were two patterns that, well, actually, I think three patterns that I wasn't too sure whether or not I would really wear often. Actually, I do want to say this. I am kind of regretting knitting up the Clara cape so long. I think I should have just gone with my gut and just knit the collar cardigan. Basically, it's just way shorter. I'm not someone who wears very long cardigans, I've found. So it's become something I have worn it a couple of times, but I'm not as excited, I think, as I would have been if I had made it a bit shorter. So I'll have to think about that. Maybe I might gift it to my mother, or otherwise I might actually just go back in, take out all of the ribbing and just redo it. We'll see about that. So yeah, there were about 3 designs that I wasn't too excited about. You had well, I think just in general, with most of them I had to make modifications, but with these 2 or 3, well, the 2 that I want to talk about in particular, I was struggling to work out how I was going to do that. So you had the Tova shirt and skirt. I call these one pattern because it's by the same designer. I think it's by, who is it? By Odd Row. So it was a shirt with some mosaic knitting at the top, and I was just kind of not sure how to do that. It was also a bit impractical because there were different colors, but just a tiny amount of color was used, or a tiny amount of yarn for each color was used. It also shows up in the skirt, but still I felt that I just didn't really know how to tackle the project in a way that would make me satisfied. So, or that would satisfy me, I should say. And so that was a pattern that I had kind of left on the back burner, something to think about in the future. But then turns out that Isager actually released this collection called the Little Isager Archives collection, and basically most of the designers just took the adult pattern that they had designed and then scaled it down for kids, but some actually made some, how would I say it, some adjustments, made them a bit different. And that happened to the Tova shirt and skirt. You had the Little Tova sweater and the Little Tova skirt, and both of these appealed way more to me. So the Tova sweater actually has mosaic, or overall mosaic knitting, and was knit with I think single strand DK weight yarn, which I thought was excellent. And it had a thick collar as well. I love myself a good collar. So it was something that I was excited about to knit. So I think I'm going to swap that out, as well as the skirt. The little Tolva skirt is actually a flared one. I think it looks very cute. In terms of sizing, it goes up to, I think, 150, something like that. And I'm just a size above in terms of children's clothing. So I'll just have to size one up, which I don't think is going to be that much of an issue. I think it does the biggest size for the sweater. It actually does fit me, but I think it might have only 3 centimeters of positive ease, and in the pattern it was recommended 10 to 15, and I think I might try and aim for the 10 centimeters of positive ease. Then the second pattern was the Agnes sweater, and with this one, for me, I didn't really like it because of the, how would I say it, the capuchon, the hood. There was a hood on the sweater, and I don't know, it didn't really appeal to me. The sweater didn't look all that appealing to me, and so I knew I would have to put in some extra time to think about how I would actually make this sweater. And then the second design came out, the little Agnes sweater, and that was exactly what I would wear. So that worked out well too. So I was very pleased to see it when it came out. So this is actually a cardigan without the hood, and that's great. So I think they use 2 fingering yarn held together or something. I don't know. I'm not too sure. Light fingering, I believe, but I think I'm going to try and make this with some sport weight yarn, 2 colors. They again had, in this particular sweater, you also use small amounts of different colored yarn, and I thought, I think it would just look nice with just 2 colors. So I'm going to try and do that, use a sport weight yarn, and hope for the best. Again, I think I'm a size above the smallest children's size, so I think if I use a yarn that is slightly thicker, I can size up with not too much of an issue. So there's that. Yep, I think that's where my head is at the moment. I did want to show something. The book that I had spoken about previously, the Simplicity Sewing book. Apparently this is from 1947, and I've been working on the ladybird costume. I think the bust area is too wide. Yeah, the bust area is too wide. I think it has the original pattern has a bust circumference of 96 centimeters, so 13 centimeters larger, 13 to 14 centimeters larger than what I have. And so I'm going to have to make some alterations. And here in this book, it's really fragile. It's already kind of the how would I say, the niches, the staples, they've completely rusted through. There's actually, now that I'm looking at it, there's actually nothing holding this book together. And at the back of the book, I can see that, you have a staple, right? That's like this. The midsection is missing, so it's completely rusted through. But just very quickly here, you have some information on pattern alterations. And I already had a book, a huge Dutch book with a lot of information as well. So that's also something I will be using to consult with. You have this cool "what type are you" chart. Cool. I don't know if it's cool. I think because it's old, I think it's cool. But yeah, just it's been a very neat book to go through. Like I said last week, I've gone through most of this book already, and now I'm just going to try and go through it every couple of weeks, maybe probably more, couple of months, just to see if there's something new that I can learn and implement. There's definitely going to be more sewing projects in the future, which I'm really excited for. And I think that's everything for this episode. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Bye bye!